What is going on, guys? Today I'm going to be showing you how to work with margins and guidelines in Adobe InDesign and how to create a basic grid structure to use as a guide for designing any layouts that you may be designing. This is going to be an example of the kind of wireframe elements that we're going to be using as the end result for this grid structure. So to start it off, we're going to go ahead and create a new document, and I have preview checked so I can show you guys what everything is going to be looking like as we do it. So we're going to assume that we're, say, doing a basic newsletter in 8.5 by 11. The first thing that we're going to want to work with is the margins and setting the margins, which are going to be completely and totally different depending on what type of a project you're going to be tackling. So, setting it really thin or even wider, but for sake of ease, we're going to stay at 1/2 inch. You can even, if you need to, say for like an internal layout, an internal spread, you can maybe adjust the inside as being a little bit further outward to compensate for the binding or stitching. But for right now, we're just going to be working with assuming that this is like a cover page for the newsletter, and we'll leave that be. The first thing that you're going to be working with to create your grid is the columns right here. To create this kind of a grid, this box, simple structured grid, you're going to go ahead and go to about 3 columns. Now, what the grid has in the end ultimately is going to be a lot more columns like this, but for the starter columns that are going to be the more bold lines, we want to stick with a lower number so that way it doesn't get as cluttered. The rest of the columns and rows we'll worry about later on with the guidelines, but the 3 columns is going to be a great basis because it has 3 solid sections, which are typically going to be the most that you're going to have, if not 4, but 3 is a good number for a newsletter, that you also are able to combine columns together and have one side spread or use all 3 independently. So this is how you're going to start your document out. And then from within this document, you're going to be using 2 main features, and both are within layout. So you're going to go to layout and then margins and columns. So this right here is going to adjust exactly what we already adjusted. The columns that you already have, as well as any marginal adjustments that you may make if you change your mind later on. To create the rest of your grid structure, you're going to go to create guides. So from here, you have 2 main sections, and it might start off with fit guides to page. I would go ahead and check fit to margins because that's how you're going to fit all of your guidelines and how it's going to base the space between guides within this preset marginal bounds. If you have it set to page, it's going to obviously be the rest of the page, but if you're wanting to keep everything within the margins, then I would go ahead and check that. That's what we're going to be doing for this grid structure at least. So then you can adjust columns and rows with guides. So there's the columns is what we already created with this, but these columns are going to be different. As you can see, they're going to show up as blue, and those are going to give you your more detailed columns that you're going to be working from. So to create the columns that I have in the simple structure, we're going to go ahead and create 9. So if we started off with 3 columns, as long as you stick to multiples of 3, then that's going to work pretty well for a column amount, because as you can see, then that's going to line up the columns to fit proportionally with the other ones. If you have like 7 or 8 and not a multiple of 3, then it's going to look kind of funky. So as long as you stick with that, so having 6, 9, you can even go all the way up to 12. If you're going to be doing more of the complex grid structures, but for right now we're just going to stick with 9. For the rows, you can do them in a number of different ways, and again, this is all based on personal preference or what you're going to be doing for the design layout job. To create a solid square, fully square layout, you're going to move that number of rows up to 12. That's going to create this perfect square grid structure that I feel is really good for starting out with any sort of newsletter design, and is pretty flexible as well. So this is what we're going to go ahead and start with for the guides. So this is going to be your basic structure. Again, you can change this up completely, make a lot more, fewer, whatever. It's all up to your personal preference, but this is what we did for now. From within this grid structure, you can do a whole bunch of things as far as laying out your project. So to kind of get it to what we had before, assuming that we have a nice header page right here that is going to be, say this is going to be an image, so we'll go ahead and fill this with, say, blue, and then you want your title to be say up here right like this to kind of represent that this is a kind of title section. And again, you're using the F key to go to your kind of wireframing tool. And so then say as well, right here you're going to have your title for your first paragraph, and we'll maybe make that stretch out a little bit more. And then we'll go ahead and create the body text that's going to be right about here, and that'll stretch out, say, this far. As well, you want your footer that you're going to have to show, like, say, the rest of the contents of your newsletter. So right here you have your first two columns, as you saw, the two columns that we created in the beginning. So these two columns are going to be the kind of area for your main body text, your main paragraph, what have you. And then this leaves us a third column to work with for any secondary articles or whatnot. This is kind of the exact layout that I showed you at the beginning. Just an example of what you can work with the very simple grid structure that I showed you how to create. Now, something to remember is that grids are guides. They're not restrictions. They're not something that you should feel restricted to, but something that you can help adequately structure your kind of creative vision for whatever layout you're going to be doing. A really awesome quote about and referring to grids was said by Alan Hurlburt, and this is what he said. He said that the grid is not an absolute. It should be used with flexibility, and when necessary, it should be modified or abandoned completely for a more workable solution. So kind of the point of this is that guides are aids, they're tools, they're not restrictions. So make sure that you don't let the guide restrict your creativity, only act as an aid or a benefit to keeping structure and keeping organization within your future design layout. I hope that this tutorial has been helpful for you guys, and I hope that you can use this kind of grid structure system to benefit you and help as an aid in any future design layout projects. With that said, have a fantastic day, and we'll see you later.